The night the dead would not stay buried in the year 1918, as war drew toward its end, another shadow moved across the world. It did not arrive with marching boots, it did not carry a flag, it came quietly through ports, barracks, towns and homes. The influenza pandemic spread with astonishing speed. Healthy people fell ill within hours. Whole households were struck at once. Doctors were overwhelmed. Church bells rang too often, and in some places the dead began to outnumber the living who could bury them. Most people now remember 1918 as a year of sickness and loss, but around the edges of that tragedy there were stranger details, the sort of details that history often leaves half hidden. In overwhelmed towns and cities, bodies could not always be buried straight away. Coffins waited in rows. Temporary mortuaries were set up in halls and buildings never meant for the dead. Funeral processions became so common that they no longer drew people to the windows. And then there were the rumors. They appeared wherever fear was strongest. Stories whispered between neighbors, stories repeated by candlelight, stories that began with, "Someone I know heard it themselves." In some places people claimed they could hear knocking from inside coffins. In others they said the dead were not lying still. A hand had moved, a body had turned, a face once thought empty seemed to change its expression. Most of these stories can be explained, some almost certainly grew in the telling. Fear does that, exhaustion does too. And in the early 20th century, the boundary between life and death could still be more uncertain than we like to imagine. Medicine was advancing, but it was not perfect. People had long feared premature burial. It was one of the great terrors of the 19th century, and it did not vanish overnight. There were stories of bells fixed to graves, safety coffins designed for the wrongly buried, anxieties about shallow breathing, deep comas, and signs of life missed in dim rooms lit badly by oil or gas. So when influenza struck and death came quickly, that old fear returned. Imagine the scene, a town already exhausted, the air cold, the curtains drawn, the smell of disinfectant everywhere, a family standing in silence around someone they loved, terrified to come too close, terrified not to. The body is taken away. There are too many others waiting. Everything is hurried. Everything feels uncertain. Then someone says they heard a sound, just one sound. A knock, a scrape, something from within the coffin wood. Was it panic? Was it wood shifting as the air changed? Was it the settling of the body? Or was it simply grief, turning every ordinary noise into something dreadful? In times of mass death, the mind becomes alert to horror. It searches for meaning. It watches for movement. It hears what it fears most. There are also darker accounts from that period. Not supernatural, but still deeply unsettling. In some emergency mortuaries, the dead were laid side by side in long rows. Workers already strained to the limit had to move among them at speed. Some later wrote about the silence of those rooms. Others wrote the opposite. They remembered coughing from the half-living, groaning from the newly dying, and the confusion of bodies not yet fully claimed by death. That may be the most haunting part of all. Not ghosts, not miracles, but the terrible closeness of life and death in a year when both seem to fill every room. A person could be alive in the morning, feverish by noon, and gone by night. Under those conditions, certainty must have felt fragile. And once certainty begins to crack, the imagination steps in. The dead would not stay buried, people whispered. But perhaps what they really meant was something else. Perhaps they meant that death itself had become too present. Too close, too crowded, too constant to be neatly sealed away beneath the ground. The influenza pandemic killed millions across the world. Its scale is difficult to grasp even now. Modern history often places it in the shadow of the First World War. But for those who lived through it, the sickness was not a footnote, its own kind of apocalypse. And in that atmosphere, the old fears returned naturally. Fear of being buried too soon. Fear of hearing movement where there should be none. Fear that the dead, so many of them, had not finished with the living. Most likely the coffins never truly knocked. Most likely the dead did not sit upright in the dark, but history is not made only of facts. It is also made of what people feared, what they whispered, and what they believed might be waiting in the next room. In 1918, with illness filling houses and graveyards alike, many people must have felt that the line between this world and the next had grown terribly thin. And when enough death gathers in one place, even silence can begin to sound like movement.